we have one last caller,
No.
and our last caller is going to be Helen. And Helen is from North Carolina, and she's a
I love
Christian.
the Carolinas.
And her evidence is that the Bible has been around for thousands of years. So it's like there's a great likelihood that it's true. So, Helen, welcome to the line.
So I want, wanted to say that I don't think that the Bible could have been around for all these thousands of years unless it was supernatural.
Okay.
I'm going to need that to be expounded upon a little bit. So, do you mean held to be true by people for thousands of years unless it was supernatural? Or that the information was retained for that long? Or can you extrapolate upon that for me?
Well, how could one book have endured for all years? It was like
Do you
supernatural.
think that there was just like a literal Bible, like a physical Bible that has existed and has just people have been adding to it, like so it started with Genesis and that chapter was handed to the next person and the next person wrote the next chapter all the way up to the New Testament and it was an actual physical object? Is that what you're saying?
Well, in its entirety, it could not have existed for this long without supernatural
Um,
intervention.
But it didn't though, Helen.
well,
It
Helen,
didn't exist in its
do you
entirety.
think that do you think that the Bible is the oldest written document that we have?
Yes.
Oh, honey, it's
Okay.
not.
Are you aware of books? Have you heard of the Iliad of Homer, for example?
I
Well,
think
it
of
has to be
Gilgamesh.
endured with all of these people adhering to it still for all the Iliad of Homer is not endured as long as the
Okay,
Bible.
so I guess that was my question. My question was more about, do you think that the Bible is the oldest document we have? So you acknowledge that we have writings from older than the Old Testament. Is that, you would agree with that, correct?
Maybe, but a religion doesn't linger on for all these years based on a lot.
So how many years do you? So I think you would acknowledge with me that there are religions that are not true. Is that it? Right? There are some religions are not true. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. So, for example, in your mind, what is the oldest religion that is currently practiced that is not true?
But
Or so, what are some examples? So, like Islam, for example, is not true in your mind, I'm assuming, right?
right.
And we track Islam back to, if I hope people are going to scream at me,
400.
it's like it's 480, like it's in the third or fourth century, I believe. So it's like 1700 years old. And then we also have the practice
Hindu
of Buddhism.
scriptures are
Yeah, for Buddhism, for
yeah.
example, so those we
Hindu.
track back to being like 5,000 years old. So people
Yeah.
who are practicing Buddhists, have scriptures that are, or have documents that are roughly as old and has been practiced roughly the same amount of time
Mm.
as Christianity.
Hindus
So
are
is that
about
a good,
3,000.
so
Sorry.
I guess how many, so actually Hinduism, for example, is older than Christianity. It's not older than the Old Testament, but it's older than Christianity. So for you, is that a good evidence that Hinduism is true? That it's really
Yeah,
old?
well, so there's that the Old Testament has been around longer than Hinduism. It's true.
Okay.
that-
But let's say, for example,
No.
I currently hold, based on the dating that I accept, the Old Testament was actually compiled around 1700 BC, not centuries and centuries before that, which actually would make the Hindu scriptures slightly older. But let's just say so how many years? So let's say if we could push Hinduism back like 300 years, which would make it a tie.
I think the
Would
Rig
that be
Veda is about 5,000, or give or
Okay.
take, years old.
So
4.5.
So would that
It was
lend
1,500.
credence? Would that lend credence to Buddhism being true in your mind? Like if someone came to you and said,
Hinduism.
you should practice Hinduism because it's super old, and people still adhere to it. In your mind, Helen, is that a good argument?
Well, no, because in Hinduism they have bride burning and sacrifice.
No, but
things of that
I don't know if you heard me.
nature.
It's really old, but your argument was that Christianity is true because it's really old, and it's been practiced for a long time. And so I guess I'm just asking, if someone else came to you and said, I want to show you this thing that's been practiced for a long time, in your mind, is that a good argument?
Well, Christianity is the only monotheistic religion, though.
You keep
So
changing your
Okay.
that's
criteria though,
why.
Helen. Your criteria are changing. But so it sounds to me in the very fact that you need to change your criteria as a response tells me that your original positing isn't a good argument and that you must recognize that. Otherwise, you would stick to your guns instead of changing your criteria. So so you must at least recognize that it being old and people adhering to it, it isn't a good argument for it. You recognize that though, right? Irrespective of what other arguments you might have.
Well, I do recognize it in
Okay.
a certain sense.
Okay.
Cool.
So in
I
your
did
mind, it
have
needs to be
one other.
combined with other things. Go ahead.
I did have one other evidence for Christianity or the supernatural being.
Sure. Yeah, sure. We have time
um,
for just a little bit more, so
When
go right ahead.
when I was 9 years old, my sister and I saw all of the clothes fly out of our closet. They were just floating in the air for a time. When they started whirling around, I want to know how you would explain that. It's nothing supernatural. It's real.
Okay.
You and your
Um, Go ahead, Shannon,
Go ahead.
please. No,
I would
please.
sug- I I would suggest that there's a likelihood that that's a retroactive reconstruction of a memory. There's a large likelihood that it didn't happen. Something similar to that may have happened in through commiseration with your sister. You may have kind of rewoven the memory into each other's minds through time without even realizing that you've done it by external cooperation and implantation. So I would suggest that you maybe are having a potentially false recollection of that. But
And
even if you wasn't, like, it's not necessarily like we went over this before. That doesn't that's not going to be compelling to anybody else, even though I recognize that for you, it's very real and very compelling. But it's for anybody external of you, or potentially in this scenario, your sister. It's not going to be a compelling argument. And even if we grant that it did happen, it's still not evidence for Christianity at the very least, or best, I would say it's evidence that if you accept that it's a supernatural thing that happened, it's just evidence for a supernatural thing. It doesn't, you still need multiple steps in order to get to therefore God, and then therefore Christian God is even extra steps after that.
yeah, and I hope, Helen, you understand that we're not in any way trying to say that you are making this story up, or that you like.
No, no.
I could fully grant that perhaps, I fully grant that to you this happened, and maybe it even did happen. I think what Shannon was helping to convey was that unfortunately we can't know that, and so for us, because we've heard so many people, and we are so aware of people's memories being faulty, and they genuinely believe what they're saying, but it didn't. We can't know for sure whether it happened. It's tricky for us. So I would say the same thing. Like, so if someone from another religion told you about their demon possession from their religion, or told you about a supernatural event that happened to them from their religion, I think that you would probably again be suspect that if I was telling you, hey, I was around and my goat started talking to me, which is a claim I've heard before from voodoo doctors, that goats started talking. Like, I think if someone said, hey, Helen, how do you explain this goat talking? Your first instinct might be, rather than trying to explain it, you might say, oh, did a goat really talk, or is there something else going on here? Does that ring true to you? Is that probably how you would react?
No, I would agree with it because I know that demons are real.
Okay.
Okay.
I
So if
recognize that. I recognize that as your perception. We do need to let you go though, Helen. We're encroaching upon 2 hours. Time flies when you're having fun.
oh,
So
blast.
Helen,
Thanks
thank
for the
you
call.
so much. Thank you.
Thanks
We
for
appreciate
having
you. Thank you for calling.
me.
Have a good rest of your evening, Helen. Thank you. All right. Wow. We
Okay.